The third knock was softer than the first two. Like she'd decided I wasn't home and was knocking out of politeness now. A formality before she left. I was standing in the hallway in my socks, holding a coffee that had gone lukewarm 20 minutes ago, and I had a clear choice. I could open the door, or I could wait her out. I almost waited her out. That's the part I think about now. How close I came to just standing there until she gave up. I'd gotten good at giving up on people first, before they could do it to me. There was a yellow sticky note on the door. I could see the edge of it through the frosted glass panel, pressed flat against the wood, and below it, slid halfway under the mat, the corner of an envelope. I opened the door. She was already turning to go. She turned back, and the first thing I noticed was that she'd written the note in green ink. Who keeps green ink in the house? Not blue or black, but green, like she'd reached into a drawer and grabbed the one pen nobody else would use. "Oh," she said, "you are home." I'm home. I knocked. I heard. She didn't apologize for that, which I liked, though I wouldn't have admitted it. She just held out the envelope like it explained everything. "This came to me by mistake. I think it's yours." I took it. Plain white, no return address. My name wasn't on it, nobody's name was on it. Just my street number and then the apartment number wrong, and then a smudge where a name should have been, like the rain had gotten to it, or someone had erased it on purpose. "It's not mine," I said. "It has your building." "It has the building. It doesn't have me." I turned it over. Nothing on the back either. "There's no name on this." She leaned in to look, which put her closer than two strangers usually stand, and she smelled like cold air and something faintly, like cut grass. "Huh," she said. "I thought there was." I'm getting ahead of myself. "My name is Adam. I'm 37. I draw maps for a living, which sounds either romantic or made up, and it's neither. I work from a studio in the second bedroom, and I draw them by hand, with pens the way almost nobody does anymore. Trail systems, mostly. The occasional vineyard. A historical society once paid me to redraw a town, as it looked in 1890, every fence line and orchard, from old surveys and a few photographs. That one took 4 months. I loved it. I'd put on a record and lose whole afternoons inside hikes the place that didn't exist anymore. I'm good at maps. I'm good at finding where one thing sits in relation to another. It's the rest of it I've stopped being good at. Here is my day. I wake up at the same time without an alarm. I make coffee in a steel pot on the stove, not a machine, because Elena hated the sound the machine made. I drink it from the same mug, the blue one with the chip on the handle, sitting at the same end of the kitchen table, looking out the same window at the same maple tree that drops the same leaves into the same gutter every October. Then I walk 15 steps to the studio and I draw, and I don't talk to anyone because there's no one to talk to. That's not a complaint. I want to be clear about that. I built it on purpose, this small life. After a certain point, small starts to feel like safe. There's a comfort in a day you can predict down to the minute. Nothing ambushes you. Nothing asks anything of you. The radio plays the station Elena set and I never changed. And at noon I eat the same lunch standing at the counter. And the hours close behind me like water. A life that small can hold you up for a long time. It can also quietly turn into a place you're hiding rather than living. And the trouble is, from the inside, those two things look exactly the same. Elena died 2 years ago. A little more than 2 years now. It was an illness, the long kind, the kind that gives you time to say things, and then makes you watch the person you said them to disappear by degrees. I don't talk about it much. I'm not going to talk about it much now. Grief gets boring to other people fast, and I learned to stop putting it in rooms where it wasn't wanted. What I'll say is this: the world got smaller and I let it. I stopped going to the market on Saturdays because we used to go together and I couldn't carry the bags up the stairs without hearing her tell me I'd bought the wrong oranges again. So I order things now. They come in boxes. A man leaves them on the step, and I don't see his face. I stopped answering the phone the first time, then most times. My sister calls. I call her back on Sundays so she knows I'm alive, and we talk for 11 minutes, and she asks if I'm eating, and I say yes, and we hang up. There's a map on my drafting table that's been unfinished for a year. A coastline, commissioned, paid for in advance. I've drawn the headlands and the inlets and the little soundings out in the water, and I cannot make myself finish the bottom corner, where the legend goes. Elena used to read me the place names off my maps in a voice she made up, some old sailor with a cough, and we'd laugh until I couldn't draw a straight line. The corner is where I'd write the names, so the corner stays empty. The client has stopped emailing. I think he assumes I died. Some days that feels close enough to true that I don't correct him. I kept Elena's coat on the hook by the door for 8 months before I could move it. When I finally did, I didn't give it away. I folded it into a box and put the box in the closet, and now and then I open the closet, for no reason, and I know it's there, and somehow that's enough. Psychologists who study grief have a phrase for that, for the way you keep a connection going with someone after they're gone. Continuing bonds, they call it. I read it somewhere late one night. It made me feel less broken to have a name for it. The coat in the box, the blue mug. The coffee made the way she liked, even though she's not here to drink it. So that was the shape of my life when the woman from across the lawn knocked on my door, holding an envelope addressed to no one. Her name was Nora. I didn't know that yet, standing in the doorway. She lived in the house directly across the small shared lawn, the yellow one with the crooked porch light that flickered at night like it was thinking about quitting. She'd moved in maybe 4 months earlier. I'd seen her carry boxes. I'd seen her struggle with a couch in the rain, and I'd watched from my window and not gone out to help, and I'd felt bad about it for almost a full hour, which for me was a lot of feeling. We'd nodded at each other twice. That was the whole of our relationship. 2 nods. Well, she said now on the step, even if it's not yours, it found you. Maybe keep it. See if anyone comes looking. I don't want mystery mail. A lot of people would be curious. I'm not a lot of people. She smiled at that, like I'd told a joke I didn't mean to tell. No, she said, I can see that. I should have closed the door. The smart move was to close the door. Hand the envelope back, tell her to give it to the postman, go inside, finish the cold coffee, draw the eastern ridge of a trail map for a client in Vermont who needed it by Friday. That was the plan my whole body was making. Instead, I stood there holding the envelope and looking at it, because something about it bothered me, and I'm a man who notices when something is in the wrong place. It's the only real skill I have left. The street number was mine. The apartment number belonged to a building with apartments, and mine is a house. There is no apartment 4. There's no apartment anything. There's just my front door and Nora's front door and a strip of grass in between. This is the strange part, I said, mostly to myself. There's no apartment 4 here. There's no apartments at all. Maybe it's a typo. Maybe. I turned it over again. But then who's the name supposed to be? She shrugged, but she watched me do it, watched me turn the envelope and study the smudge where a name had been, and there was something in her face I couldn't read. Not amusement exactly, closer to patience. Like she'd asked a question and was waiting to see if I'd answer it without knowing it had been asked. Open it, she said. It's not mine. It's not anyone's, you just said. No name. She tilted her head. If it's not anyone's, then it's not stealing. It's just curiosity. Curiosity isn't a crime. Last time I checked. She had me there, technically. I didn't open it. I'll hold on to it, I said. If someone comes asking, they can have it. Sure. She put her hands in her jacket pockets. She didn't. The light was going gold and long across the lawn, the way it does in early evening when the day is deciding to let go, and a few maple leaves came down between us, and neither of us said anything for a second, and the silence wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't unbearable either. That surprised me. A stranger's silence is usually unbearable. I'd built a whole life around avoiding them. You're the map guy, she said finally. I draw maps. That's what I said. You said map guy. There's a difference. Is there? Map guy sounds like I sell them out of a van. She laughed. A real one, short and low, and she covered it with her hand for half a second the way some people do when a laugh catches them off guard, like they're embarrassed by the volume of their own amusement. And I felt something move in my chest that I hadn't felt in long enough that I didn't recognize it at first. It took me a second. Then I placed it. I'd wanted to say something else, just to hear her laugh again. I shut that down fast. I'm good at shutting things down. Anyway, I said, and I lifted the envelope a little. The universal gesture for this conversation is over. Thanks for bringing it by. You didn't have to. I didn't, she agreed. But you don't get a lot of foot traffic over there. I figured you could use the interruption. I didn't know what to do with that. It wasn't quite an insult, and it wasn't quite kindness, and it landed somewhere in the soft middle where I keep things I'm not ready to look at. She'd been watching me the way I'd been watching her, was the thing, from her window. She'd noticed the boxes on the step, and the man who left them, and the face I didn't show anyone. People always see more than you think. That's the part nobody tells you about hiding. You're never actually hidden. You're just not being approached. Good night, I said. Good night, map guy. She crossed the lawn back to the yellow house, and I watched her go, which I shouldn't have, and the crooked porch light flickered on as she reached her door like it had been waiting for her. Then I went inside and closed the door, and stood in the hallway with the envelope. I should have thrown it out. I want you to understand the kind of man I was that night, because it matters for everything after. I was a man who made coffee for a wife who'd been gone 2 years. I was a man who folded a coat into a box. I was a man who'd narrowed his whole world down to a stove and a desk and a window. Because narrow felt like the only safe size left, and the loneliness of it had stopped feeling like pain and started feeling like furniture. You can live inside loneliness, so long it just becomes the room you're in. You stop noticing the walls. So I should have thrown the envelope out. A man like that throws it out. He doesn't want loose threads. He doesn't want questions. He spent 2 years making sure nothing comes knocking. I didn't throw it out. I carried it to the kitchen and I set it on the table, propped against the salt shaker, next to the blue mug, and I looked at it through the rest of my cold coffee. The street number that was mine. The apartment that didn't exist. The smudge where a name should have been. I'm a man who finds where one thing sits in relation to another. And this thing didn't sit anywhere. It pointed at my house and then refused to point at me. I told myself I was keeping it for the rightful owner. That was the lie, and it was a small one, and I almost believed it. The truth was simpler, and I wasn't ready for it. For the first time in 2 years, something had come to my door that I couldn't immediately explain, and a part of me I'd assumed was dead. The part that loves a place that doesn't exist on any map. The part that lost 4 months inside a town from 1890 and called it joy. That part had quietly woken up and wanted to know more. I didn't open the envelope that night. I want to be honest, I didn't. I'm not the kind of man who opens other people's mail, even mail belonging to nobody. But I didn't throw it out either, and I left it propped against the salt shaker where I'd see it in the morning. And before I went to bed, I caught myself, just once, glancing across the dark lawn toward the yellow house, where the crooked light still flickered, and I wondered, with no good reason to wonder it, whether she really hadn't seen a name on that envelope, or whether she'd seen exactly what was on it, and crossed the lawn anyway, and stood on my step in the gold light with green ink in her pocket, holding out a reason to knock. The next note came 3 days later, and the address on that one was wrong in a different way. The next note came 3 days later, and the address on that one was wrong in a different way. This time it had a name. The name just wasn't real. There was a postcard tucked under my mat, no envelope, face up so anyone could read it, and it was addressed to a Mr. R. Halloran at my street number, and there is no Halloran N here. There never has been. I looked at it for a long time on the step. The handwriting was green again. I should explain how the 3 days went, because they mattered more than I let on at the time. I didn't throw the first envelope out. I told you that. What I didn't tell you is that I moved it. The morning after she brought it, I picked it up off the table and I put it in a drawer, and then an hour later I took it out of the drawer and propped it back against the salt shaker, because the drawer felt like hiding it from myself. A grown man, 37 years old, relocating an envelope around his own kitchen, like it was a small animal he wasn't sure he was allowed to keep. I went back to my maps. I drew the Eastern Ridge for the client in Vermont, and I sent it Friday like I promised. I made coffee in the steel pot. I ate the same lunch at the counter. But something had shifted the way a picture shifts when one corner comes loose from the wall. Everything still hangs. It just hangs wrong, and you keep glancing at it. I caught myself looking at the yellow house. That was the new thing. I'd be at the window with the blue mug, and the maple tree would be doing its slow business of letting go, and my eyes would drift past it, across the strip of grass, to the crooked porch light and the dark windows behind it. Once I saw her in the kitchen over there, just a shape moving behind glass, and I stepped back from my own window like I'd been caught. Caught at what? I couldn't have said. Watching a neighbor wash a dish. There's a thing psychologists call the mere exposure effect. I looked it up later, the way I look everything up, alone at night with the screen too bright. It's a simple idea. People come to like things just from seeing them more. A face, a song, a word in another language. The more often it shows up, the warmer you feel toward it, and you don't even know it's happening. You think you're making a decision. You're just being worn smooth by repetition, like a stone in a river. I think that's what was starting. I'd seen her twice and nodded. Now I'd seen her 3 times, and one of those times she'd laughed, and the laugh had moved into the house and wouldn't leave. So when the postcard came, addressed to a man who didn't exist, I didn't pretend it surprised me. I picked it up and I crossed the lawn. She opened the door before I knocked, which meant she'd seen me coming, which meant she'd been at the window too. "Map guy," she said. "There's no Halloran here." "No." She leaned against the doorframe. She had a dish towel over one shoulder and flour on her wrist, and the house behind her smelled like something baking, warm and brown and ordinary. The smell of a place where someone actually lived. Funny. The male seems to think there is. The mail's wrong twice now. I held the postcard up, first a name that wasn't there. Now a name that isn't anyone. You've been keeping track. I keep track of things. It's the job. She took the postcard from me, looked at it, turned it over the way I'd turned the envelope over, and I noticed she did it the exact way I did, slow, like the back might say something the front wouldn't. The back was blank. Halloran, she said, trying the name out. Sounds like somebody's grandfather. Somebody with a good hat. It sounds like nobody. That's the point. Everybody's somebody to somebody. She handed it back. Maybe he used to live here, before you. Maybe his mail's just slow. I've been in this house 6 years. Then he had a slow 6 years, she smiled. The flower on her wrist had a small handprint shape to it, like she'd pressed her own palm there without thinking. You want to come in? I'm making a mess of some bread. It's going to be terrible. I could use a witness who isn't me. I said no. I want to be honest about that. She offered, and the warm brown smell came across the threshold and pulled at something, and I said no, the way I'd been saying no to everything for 2 years. Because no is a door you can close, and yes is a door you can't. I told her I had a map to finish. I'd sent it Friday. I lied to a woman about a coastline so I wouldn't have to stand in her kitchen and find out how much I'd like it. Suit yourself, she said. No offense in it. She'd offered, I'd declined, she let it go, and I respected that more than I can tell you. People who push are exhausting. She just wasn't going to chase me across my own lawn. But the bread's your loss. I make terrible bread with real conviction. I went back inside. I put the postcard against the salt shaker next to the envelope. 2 now. The collection had started and I hadn't decided to start it. The notes kept coming after that. Not every day, every few days, like she was rationing them, and each one was wrong in some new and specific way. And each one gave me a reason to walk over there or her a reason to walk over here, and we both knew it, and neither of us said it. There was the one for an apartment number that climbed too high. Apartment 9, on a street where the houses only go to 22 and not one of them is split into apartments. There was the one with the right name spelled 4 different ways, like the writer had been guessing. There was one that just said resident, which is a thing real mail does, except this one had been hand-addressed in green ink, and no machine and no company hand-letters the word resident to you. Somebody wrote that on purpose. Somebody wrote resident the way you'd write a dare. And there was the day she rang my bell with a catalog. A seed catalog, thick and glossy, the kind that comes addressed to people who garden. This is yours, she said deadpan, holding it out. I don't garden. It's got your number on it. It's got a number, it doesn't have me. We'd done this before. It had become a thing we said, a little call and response. The building has me, but the name doesn't. And saying it now we both nearly smiled, and both caught it, and both looked away. Nora, I said, and it was the first time I'd used her name out loud, and I watched her notice that I knew it. Where are you getting these? The mailbox. Easy. Where everybody gets mail. That's not what I asked. I know. She tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. The light was doing the gold thing again, the long evening light. It always seemed to be doing the gold thing when she stood on my step. Or maybe I only stood on my step in the evenings. I couldn't tell anymore which of us was choosing the hour. Maybe somebody upstream of us both has terrible handwriting. Maybe the whole street's mail is cursed. You're the one who finds where things sit. You tell me where they're coming from. And there it was. She'd handed it back to me like a card across a table. You tell me. She knew something. I knew she knew something. And instead of pushing, I took the seed catalog I would never use. And I said, thank you. And I went inside, because some part of me had decided I'd rather keep the question than spend the answer. A question keeps you walking across the lawn. An answer ends it. I wasn't ready to find out what was on the other side of the answer, because the other side of the answer was a thing I'd have to feel, and I'd built 2 years of careful quiet specifically to avoid feeling things. That's the part I'm least proud of. I knew somewhere lower than thinking that the mail wasn't lost. Mail doesn't get lost like that. Not in green ink. Not to a man who never existed, and then a man spelled 4 ways and then the word resident, written by hand. The numbers didn't add up, and I add up numbers for a living, and I let them not add up because the not adding up was the first thing in 2 years that had pulled me out of the chair. I chose the mystery over the truth on purpose. I'd like to say I didn't know I was doing it. I knew. Then my sister showed up, and the house got loud. Claire is 4 years younger than me, and she has never in her life let a silence sit. She arrived on a Tuesday, unannounced, with 2 bags of groceries and a tone. She let herself in with the key I gave her years ago for emergencies, and never thought of as a standing invitation, and she put the bags on the counter and started unpacking them into my cupboards like she was correcting them. You have no real food, she said. You have coffee and crackers and a sad onion. I'm not leaving you with a sad onion. I eat fine. You eat like a man waiting to be evicted. She held up the seed catalog, which was sitting on the counter where I'd left it. Since when do you garden? I don't. Then why's it addressed to you? I took it from her and put it in the drawer with the rest of it. I hadn't meant to keep them all in one drawer. I looked down and there they were, the envelope and the postcard and the catalog, and the 4-time spelled name, and the word resident, a small green inked archive, and I shut the drawer before she could see it as a collection instead of clutter. Claire was here, of course, because Claire's own house had come apart. The divorce had been final maybe a month. She didn't lead with that. She led with my groceries, my onion, my closed curtains, my unanswered phone, the unfinished coastline she found on the drafting table, and tapped with one finger like it was evidence. This has been here how long? You used to finish things, Adam. She had opinions about all of it. She had so many opinions about my life because opinions about my life were softer to hold than the silence in hers. I knew that. I'd watch her stand in my kitchen rearranging my cupboards with her wedding ring gone and a pale band where it used to be. And I understood exactly what she was doing because I do the same thing in a different shape. She managed me. I made coffee for a ghost. We're the same animal, my sister and I. We just hide in different rooms. You should sell this place, she said on the second day, standing at the window with her arms crossed. It's too big for one person. It's too much of her. You walk around inside a museum, you know that? You should sell it and get a little apartment somewhere with light, somewhere new, somewhere that isn't this. I like this. You don't like it. You're stuck in it. There's a difference. She was at the window when she said it, and I watched her gaze drift the way mine had been drifting for 2 weeks, out across the lawn to the yellow house, and I felt myself tense before she even spoke. Who lives over there? She said. A neighbor. A neighbor with a name? Nora. Claire turned around, slow. She had a look on her face I hadn't seen in a long time, a sharp little knowing look, the look of a younger sister who has just found a loose thread and intends to pull it all the way out. Nora, she repeated. You said it fast. I said it normal. You said it like you've practiced it. She came away from the window, and for the first time since she'd arrived with her groceries and her tone, she wasn't managing me, she was reading me, and Claire reads me better than anyone alive. There's mail, she said slowly, working it out loud. There's a drawer full of mail you shoved shut when I walked up, and there's a woman across the lawn with a name you say like it's breakable. She tilted her head. Adam, what is going on over here? Nothing's going on. Some mail keeps coming to the wrong house. She brings it over, that's all. That's all, Claire said. That's all. And my sister, who had let herself in to manage my onions because she couldn't bear to sit alone in the wreck of her own marriage, looked at me for a long moment, and something in her face changed. It got gentler and worse at the same time, because she'd seen it. Whatever I'd been keeping in that drawer, she'd seen the shape of it on my face, and I think it scared her a little, the way a thing you'd written off coming back to life will scare you. She didn't push. Not yet. She'd push later, when it cost more. For now, she just turned back to the window and looked at the yellow house with the crooked light, and she said, almost to herself, 2 years, Adam, and let it hang there. I didn't answer her. I went and made coffee I didn't want, in the steel pot, the way Elena liked it. That night the wind came up. I heard it first against the maple, that long dry rattle the branches make in October when the leaves are loose and the air can finally get at them. And then I heard it find the gutters and the crooked light next door, which knocked against its bracket in the dark. The weather had been promising itself for days, that low-grade pressure that sits on a town and waits. I stood at the window with the curtain in my hand and watched the yellow house go dark room by room. And the first rain came in slow, and then all at once, the way it does, the sky just deciding. I didn't know it yet, standing there with the curtain in my hand and my sister asleep in the spare room, and a drawer full of green-inked mail addressed to nobody. But the storm that was coming for the house that night was going to do what none of the careful weeks had managed. It was going to put Nora on my porch with nowhere to run from the question, and me with nowhere to hide from the answer, and it was going to make one of us, finally, say the true thing out loud. The knock came at the worst hour of the storm, and it was the loudest of all the knocks she'd ever given me. Not polite this time. Not the formality of someone who decided I wasn't home. This was the knock of a person already soaked, with the wind at her back, pounding because the rain was louder than her hand. I was at the window with the curtain still bunched in my fist. The yellow house across the lawn had gone fully dark, not curtains drawn dark, no power dark, the kind where the whole shape of a house disappears and you only know it's there because the lightning keeps redrawing it. I opened the door, and she was standing in it like something the night had spat up. "My power's out," Nora said, water running off the end of her nose, "and a branch came down on the line, and I don't have a flashlight that works, and I am not sitting alone in a dark house listening to that." She wiped her face with the back of a wet hand, which did nothing. "I saw your lights were on. I'm sorry, I didn't know where else." "Come in," I said. I didn't think about it. That was the strange part. For 2 years I'd weighed every yes like it cost me something. This one didn't even reach the part of me that weighs. She was wet, and the night was bad, and I said, "Come in," the way you'd say it to anyone. She stepped onto the mat and stood there dripping, arms folded, looking like she regretted the whole crossing already. "You're soaked," I said. "I'm aware." I got her a towel. Then a sweater, one of mine, gray and too big, because the only other option was a closet I don't open, and I wasn't going to open it tonight. She took the sweater and looked at it and looked at me, and something passed over her face, and she didn't say anything about whose it might have been. She just went into the bathroom and came out a minute later in dry clothes that hung off her, holding her wet things in a ball, smaller somehow without the rain making her big. Claire was asleep down the hall. The house had its emergency candles out, and one lamp burning on the kitchen table because my power was flickering too, threatening to go. We sat at the table, 2 strangers and a lamp in a storm trying to get in at the windows. For a while neither of us performed. That's the thing I remember most. Every other time we'd met, there'd been the call and response, "The map guy, the building has me but the name doesn't." The little choreography we'd built so we'd never have to stand still in front of each other. Here there was nowhere to put any of that. The rain had taken the script away. She sat with her hands around a mug of tea she wasn't drinking, and I sat across from her, and we just breathed in the same room while the world fell down outside. "I keep thinking the maple's going to come through your window," she said. "It won't. It drops branches, but it never comes down. It's older than the house. I listened to it rattle. Elena used to say it was waiting us out, the tree." I said it before I knew I was going to, her name, out loud, in front of someone. The first time in longer than I could measure. It sat on the table between us, and I felt my whole chest go still around it. The way you go still when you've stepped somewhere you weren't sure would hold your weight. Nora didn't pounce on it. She didn't soften her face into the sympathy face, the one I'd left rooms to avoid. She just nodded, like the name was a fact about the weather. "Your wife," she said. "My wife, 2 years ago." "I know," she said. 2 words, and the whole thing turned on them. "You know," I said. She set the mug down. She looked at it instead of me, and the lamp shook a little in a gust, and she breathed out, long, like she'd been carrying something up a flight of stairs and had finally reached the top. "There's no Halloran, Adam," she said. "There's no apartment 4. There's no seed catalog. There's no resident written by hand. There never was a man spelled 4 different ways." She turned the mug a quarter turn on the table, slow the way I turn an envelope. I wrote all of it. I wrote every one of them. In green ink, because green ink was the one pen in the box, and it made me feel like it wasn't quite as much of a lie if I used a stupid pen. The rain filled the space where my answer should have been. "I don't understand," I said, which was a lie. I understood. I just wanted to make her say it, the way she'd once made me say the envelope had no name. It was cruel of me, a little, and I knew it, and I did it anyway because I was scared of what came next. "Yes, you do." She looked up. "You find where one thing sits in relation to another. You said that to me the first night, on the step. You knew the numbers didn't add up weeks ago. You're a man who adds up numbers for a living, and you let mine not add up on purpose, because if you'd added them up, you'd have had to ask me why. So don't sit there and tell me you don't understand." I didn't say anything. "I made up the mail," she said, "because I saw you. I want to be careful here, because what she said could sound like a small horror in the wrong mouth, and it wasn't. She wasn't a woman watching me through a gap in the blinds, cataloging me. She was lonelier than that, and braver, and worse at it. "I moved in 4 months ago," she said. "Into that yellow house with the light that won't stay on, and I didn't know one person in this town, not one. And there was a man across the lawn who never came outside. Boxes showed up on your step, and a man left them, and you never opened the door while he was there. I'd see your lamp go on in the second bedroom at the same time every morning, and go off at the same time every night, and you never once stood in your own yard. And I thought, there's someone over there who's done what I'm doing, except he's been doing it for years and he's gotten good at it. He's built the whole machine." And it scared me, because I could see myself in 5 years, in that house, with that light, and nobody crossing the lawn to me either. The lamp steadied. Outside, the rain eased for a moment, the way storms breathe, and then came back harder. "I'm not good at the front door version," she said, walking over, knocking. "Hi, I'm new. I'm alone. Do you want to be friends? I tried it once in the last place, and it goes wrong in my mouth. I sound like I'm asking for something. So I'm a coward and I'm clever, and I found a sideways way in. I wrote a letter to a man who didn't exist, and I put your number on it, so that I'd have a reason to stand on your step that wasn't me, was just the mail, was just a mistake that needed fixing. And you opened the door." Her voice caught one small place, and she pushed through it. "And you were exactly as locked up as I'd guessed, and I kept doing it. Because every wrong envelope bought me 3 more minutes of a person." There's a word for what she was doing, sitting in my kitchen handing me the true version of herself with both hands. Psychologists call it self-disclosure, the act of letting another person see the parts you'd normally keep covered, and they'll tell you it's the thing that turns 2 strangers into something else. They'll also tell you it's a risk every time, because the person across the table can do anything with what you've handed them. She'd handed me hers. She was watching my face to see what I'd do with it, and her jaw was set like she'd already braced for the worst one. So this was the moment. The whole thing had been walking toward it. A woman had just told me she'd invented a small paper world for 4 months, for the chance to sit where she was sitting, and the warmth I'd been holding off since the first laugh on the step came up in me all at once. Fast and unwelcome and undeniable, and right behind it, like it always came, the guilt. Because I make coffee for a wife who's been gone 2 years. Because there's a coat folded in a box in a closet I wouldn't open even to get this woman a sweater. Because the warm thing and the dead thing live in the same chest, and one of them felt like a betrayal of the other, and I couldn't tell anymore which. "Why are you telling me now?" I said. My voice came out rougher than I meant. "You had it working. You could have kept it going. I'd have kept taking the mail." "Because of the storm." She gestured at the window, the dark, the down line. "Because I'm sitting in your real kitchen in your real sweater, and there's no envelope between us, and I'm tired of the sideways way, and it got me to your table. It can't get me any farther. And I'd started to want farther, and you can't get there on a fake letter. You have to do it with your actual face." She looked at me. Wet hair. My sweater swallowing her hands. "So, this is my actual face. It's the bravest thing I've done in a year, and I picked the worst possible night to do it." I didn't answer fast enough. "I know that now. There's a window after someone makes themselves that bare, a narrow one, where what they need is for you to step toward them. And I stood in it too long, because I was looking for Elena in the room and couldn't decide if she'd want me to step or hate me for it." And Nora watched the window close on my face. She was good at reading a locked-up man. She'd studied one for 4 months. "Right," she said softly, and started to stand. "I'll just sit in the dark at my place. The branch will keep me company." Nora. "It's fine. It was a lot to put on you. I'm aware of how it sounds." "Sit down," I said. "Please, the storm's still going. You're not walking into that." And then, because she was already half up and I could feel her leaving and I didn't want her to, the way I hadn't wanted her to the very first evening on the step, I said the thing that was true and only half of it. "I'm glad you knocked. I don't know what to do with the rest of it yet, but I'm glad you knocked. Both times. All of it." She lowered herself back into the chair. She didn't smile, but the set went out of her jaw. We sat there in the lamplight, both of us cracked open a different amount, neither of us closed back up, and the rain kept on, and I thought, this is the farthest I've let anyone in since the box went in the closet, and I'm terrified, and I don't want her to go. That was where Claire found us. She came down the hall in the dark in an old shirt, holding her phone for a light, hair flat on one side. She'd woken to the storm, or to voices, and she stopped at the edge of the kitchen and took in the whole picture in about a second, because Claire reads a room the way I read a coastline. The lamp, the 2 mugs. A woman she'd only seen across a lawn, sitting in my sweater at our mother's old table. My face, which I couldn't fix in time. "Oh," Claire said. "Hi." "This is Nora," I said. From across the lawn, her power's out. I gathered. Claire looked at Nora, and Nora looked back, and something passed between 2 women that I will never fully be able to translate, some quick mutual reading. And then Claire said, "I'll make more tea," and went to the stove, and didn't ask one single question, which from Claire was the loudest thing she could have done. Nora left an hour later, when the rain finally thinned. With a working flashlight from my drawer and my sweater, she said she'd return, and we both knew was now hers. I walked her to the edge of the porch. The lawn between the houses was a black river. Her crooked light was dead, the whole yellow house just an outline against the lightning, and she crossed to it small and careful, and the dark took her, and I stood there longer than the cold made sense for. When I came back in, Claire was sitting at the table with both hands around a mug, waiting for me, and I knew the quiet hour was over. "Sit down," she said. I sat. "I'm not going to manage you," she said. "I know that's all I've done since I got here. The onion and the curtains and sell the house. I do it because it's easier than the thing I actually came here to not talk about, which is that I'm 33 and I'm divorced, and I sleep in your spare room because I can't be in my own house yet. So I'm not going to stand at your window and tell you what to do with your life. I'm out of room to do that from." The candle guttered between us. "But I watched your face just now," she said, when she stood up to leave, "and I haven't seen that face on you in 2 years, Adam. Not once. Not on the phone on Sundays, not when I walked in here, not ever." Her voice went careful. "You make coffee for a woman who's gone. I lived next door to it growing up. I know exactly who you are. And I am the last person on earth allowed to tell you to let go of someone. Because I'm wearing a ring tan from a man I'm not even allowed to be sad about, the way you're allowed to be sad about Elena. Nobody throws you a casserole when the marriage just ends. There's a name for grief like mine, you know. The kind nobody lets you have out loud." She almost smiled. "So I'm not telling you to let go. I'm telling you to say what you feel, to yourself first, out loud, because you've spent 2 years hiding behind a dead woman, and she'd hate that, Adam. You know she would. She'd hate being used as a wall." I looked at the lamp, the box in the closet, the coffee, the chipped blue mug, all the small true ways I'd kept Elena in the house with me. None of it was the problem. Keeping her was never the problem. The problem was that I'd stopped keeping her and started hiding inside her, and there's a difference, and my sister had just named it across a kitchen table at 2 in the morning while her own ring finger sat pale in the candlelight. "I don't know how to want something again," I said. It was the truest sentence I'd said in 2 years. I forgot how. I think I made sure I'd forget. "I know," Claire said. "Me too." And she reached across the table and put her hand over mine, the bare ring finger and all. And for a long moment the two of us sat there in the afterstorm quiet, the same animal in 2 different rooms, finally in the same one. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark and listened to the maples settle, and I thought about a woman across a black lawn who'd built 4 months of fake mail just to earn 3 minutes of my actual face, and who'd told me the truth and watched me freeze and gone home to a dark house anyway. She'd done the brave thing. She'd come to my door. Every single time, it had been her crossing the lawn, her knocking, her standing soaked in my doorway with her real face out. And I had opened the door and let her in, and never once, in 4 months, gone to hers. Somewhere around the gray part of morning, with the rain finally stopped and the gutters still dripping, I understood what the next thing was, and it scared me more than the storm had. It wasn't enough to be glad she knocked. A man can be glad behind a door for the rest of his life. If any of this was going to be real, the next knock couldn't be hers. It had to be mine. I was going to have to do the thing I hadn't done in 2 years and might not remember how to do at all. I was going to have to put my own shoes on and cross the lawn myself and stand on the crooked porch of the yellow house and find out whether a man who'd buried himself with his wife could still walk back up to the surface and let someone see his actual face in the daylight. I put my own shoes on and I crossed the lawn myself. It took me until the afternoon to do it. The grass was still wet from the storm, and my shoes were soaked through by the 3rd step, and I crossed that little stretch of lawn like it was the whole width of something. 4 months I'd watched her cross it, and it had never once gone the other way. Now, it was my feet in the wet, my shape moving through her yard, and I felt the whole town could see me. Though the street was empty and the only witness was the maple dropping water down my collar. The yellow house got bigger the closer I got. The light over her door was off, of course. The light over her door was always off. I stood on the crooked porch a long time before I knocked. Not because I'd forgotten how, because the last door I'd stood at like this had a hospital number on it, and my body remembered that, even if my head was telling it this was a different kind of door. I made a fist, lowered it, made it again. Then I thought about her standing in my doorway soaked to the skin, telling me it was the bravest thing she'd done in a year, and I knocked before I could talk myself back across the lawn. She opened the door in socks. No rain to make her big this time, no envelope in her hand. Just Nora, in the gray sweater that was mine and now wasn't, with a streak of something across her cheek like she'd been cleaning, blinking at me like I was a thing that couldn't be there. "Your power back on?" I said. I'd planned better ones on the way over and lost all of them on the porch. "This morning," she said. "Adam, what are you doing here? Is everything okay?" "Nothing's wrong." I made myself stand still in it. "I came over because you've crossed that lawn 100 times and I never crossed it once, and that's been bothering me since the storm." So I gestured behind me, vaguely, at the wet grass in my own dark house. Here I am, on your porch, with my actual face. Something moved through her then. She put a hand on the door frame like she needed it. You want to come in, she said. It wasn't quite a question. I want to tell you something first, I said. Out here, while I still have it. The thing about saying the true thing out loud is that you can rehearse it for 2 years and still arrive at the door with nothing in your hands. I'd buried Elena's name for so long that lifting it felt like lifting furniture I'd nailed to the floor. But Nora had stood in my kitchen and handed me her whole self with both hands and watched me freeze, and I owed her the same risk back. There's a reason it works that way, the trading of true things. It only counts when it can cost you. The person across from you can do anything with what you hand them, and you hand it anyway. That's the entire deal. Her name was Elena, I said, my wife. We were married 11 years and she died 2 years ago in the spring and I stopped. I had to stop saying it for a second, then went on. I don't mean I grieved. People grieve, that's normal, that's allowed. I stopped. I made her coffee every morning for 2 years and poured it down the sink. I kept her coat in a box and I wouldn't open the closet, even for you, even to get you a sweater out of a different shelf. I built a whole machine for staying still. Exactly like you said you watched me do from over here. You weren't wrong about any of it. Her eyes were bright, and she didn't say anything, which was the kindest thing she could have done. And then a woman across the lawn started sending herself fake mail just to get 3 minutes of me, I said. And I started living for the knock. I'd have the coffee made, and I'd watch the window. I let you think I hadn't noticed the numbers didn't add up because if I'd said the numbers out loud, I'd have had to admit I wanted you to keep coming. And wanting something again felt like leaving Elena out in the cold. Adam, she started. Let me finish or I won't, I breathed. I talked to my sister after you left, and she told me I'd stopped keeping Elena and started hiding inside her. And she's right. Keeping someone you lost, that's not the problem. You're allowed to keep her. I'll keep her till I die. But I used her as a wall, and she'd have hated that, and I'm done doing it. I looked at this woman on her own crooked porch in my old sweater. So I'm not going to watch you in secret and call it loyalty to a dead woman. That's a coward's version, and I've been a coward for 2 years. I'm telling you to your face, in the daylight, that I want to know you. Properly. The front door way. No more mail. The street stayed empty. A car went by 2 roads over. Somewhere a gutter was still letting go of last night drop by drop. You came across the lawn, she said. Her voice did the catching thing it had done in my kitchen, one small place. You actually came across the lawn. It's a very short lawn, I said. It took me 2 years. She laughed, and it broke in the middle, and she pressed the back of her hand to her mouth, the way she had the first night on my step, then stepped back and held the door. Come in, she said. I'll make you real coffee, the kind you actually drink. I drank the coffee. That's the part I keep coming back to, of all of it. Not the porch, the coffee. I sat at her small kitchen table, in the yellow house with a lug in front of me, and I drank it. 2 years of pouring it down a sink, and I sat across from a living person and drank a cup of coffee all the way to the bottom. It was too strong. I told her it was too strong. She told me to drink it anyway. I did. We didn't fall into anything that afternoon. I want to be honest about that, because the fake version of this story has us folding together on the porch, and we didn't. We sat at her table and talked like 2 people who'd been lying to each other in a very gentle way for 4 months and had just agreed to stop. She told me about the last town, the one where the front door knock had gone wrong in her mouth. I told her about the box in the closet I still hadn't opened, and that I didn't know when I would, and she said she wasn't asking me to, and I believed her. We were careful with each other, both of us hurt in the kind of way that makes you careful. And that felt right. It felt like something that could hold weight. Claire left a week after the storm. She'd been in my spare room a month by then, and one morning I came into the kitchen, and her bag was by the door. She was at the counter with her coffee, and she'd put the curtains back the way I liked them, half open, after a month of opening them all the way every morning to fix me. I'm going home, she said, to my actual house, the one I've been hiding from. I looked at the bag. You sure? No. She wrapped both hands around her mug. But I told you to say what you feel out loud. And then I realized I've been sleeping in your spare room for a month so I'd never have to walk into my own kitchen and admit a marriage died in it. I can't tell you to stop hiding behind Elena and keep hiding behind you. That's not a thing I get to do. I didn't say anything for a second. Then I said it's allowed to be hard. Yours. Even if nobody brings a casserole. Her eyes went, just slightly, I know. I'm starting to. There's a whole grief that nobody lets you have out loud, and I've been pretending I didn't qualify for it. She set the mug down. I qualify. You qualify, I said. She crossed the kitchen and hugged me, hard, the bare ring finger and all, and then she stepped back and wiped her face with the heel of her hand, exactly the way Nora had wiped the rain off in my doorway, and I thought how strange it was that the two women who'd cracked me open did the same thing with their hands. She seems good, Claire said, at the door, nodding across the lawn. Nora. From the one tea I poured. She made up 4 months of fake mail to get me to open a door. Claire laughed, the first full one I'd heard from her since she arrived. Then she's smarter than both of us. Don't let that one cross the lawn for you anymore, Adam. You go cross it. She picked up her bag and opened the closet when you're ready. Not for her, for you. Then she drove home to the kitchen she'd been afraid of, to start having a grief out loud that nobody was going to bring her a casserole for. And I stood in my doorway and watched her go the way I'd watched Nora go. Except this time I wasn't watching from behind anything. I was just a man in his own in the morning seeing his sister off. I made Nora a map. It's what I do. I find where one thing sits in relation to another. I'd told her that on the step the first night like it was just my job, and it took me until that week to understand it was the only love language I had. So I got out the good paper, the heavy kind I save, and I drew her a map. Not of anywhere far, that was the point. I drew our 2 streets, hers and mine, which are the same street. I drew the yellow house, and I drew my house, and I drew the lawn between them, the short lawn, the one it took me 2 years to cross. I marked the maple that drops branches but never comes down. I marked the spot on my porch where she'd stood the first night with the envelope that had no name on it. And I marked the spot on her porch where I'd stood with no envelope at all. And I drew a small dotted line between the two, the kind a map maker uses for a route, going both ways. At the bottom where the legend goes, I didn't write anything clever. I wrote the distance, 41 feet, because I'd paced it from my door to hers. I'd been telling myself for 4 months it was farther than that. I gave it to her on a Sunday, rolled up, no ribbon, because I'm not a ribbon person, and she'd have known it was borrowed. She unrolled it on her kitchen table and went very still over it, the way I go still over a name. Her finger found the dotted line, then the legend at the bottom, 41 feet. That's all it was, she said. That's all it ever was. She didn't cry, exactly. She put her hand flat on the paper, over both houses at once, like she could hold the whole short distance under her palm. Then she looked up at me, and the light over her door was still broken, and the coffee on the table was still too strong, and none of it was a grand thing, and all of it was the realest thing I'd touched in 2 years. You know what's funny, she said. I have a whole drawer of envelopes I never used. I bought a box of 50 and I only needed about a dozen. Burn them, I said. I'm framing this instead. She tapped the map, right by the door, so every time the light won't come on, I'll know exactly how far it is to a working one. I have thought a lot since about how close I came to staying behind the door for the rest of my life. How easy it would have been. I had it all built. The coffee, the closet, the second bedroom lamp going on and off at the same times like a heart on a monitor. A man can disappear inside his own grief and call it faithfulness, and nobody stops him because grief is the one room nobody knocks on. I'd have been fine in there. I'd have been fine forever, in the way that a house with the power off is fine. Still, standing, just dark. It took a stranger sending herself fake letters to get me to a window. It took a storm to get me to a table. It took my sister, wearing a grief nobody let her name, to get me to say a dead woman's name out loud and mean it as a beginning instead of a wall. And it took me finally putting on my own wet shoes to cross 41 feet of lawn I'd told myself for years was an ocean. I still make Elena's coffee some mornings. I want to be honest about that, too. The losing of someone doesn't get returned to you just because you start living again. You carry them. The grief people will tell you that the bond doesn't end, it only changes shape, and mine has. I don't pour the coffee down the sink anymore. Some mornings I drink it on the porch, in the cold, and I think about her, and then I look across the short lawn at a yellow house where a woman is framing a map by a broken door, and I let both of those things be true in the same chest at the same time. They fit. It turns out they always could. I was the one who kept them in separate rooms. So here's the only thing I'd ask you. If you've stayed with me this long, not about me, about you. Somewhere out there you've got your own 41 feet that you've decided is an ocean. Your own door you only ever answer and never knock on. Your own light you keep telling yourself you'll fix tomorrow. We all build the machine, one quiet choice at a time, until the staying still feels like the only safe thing left. And the world lets us because nobody crosses the lawn for a person who never comes outside. So when was the last time you let someone see your actual face in the daylight? When did you last put on your wet shoes and cross the thing you decided was too far? And if it's been a while, If you've gone dark in a way that everyone stopped noticing because you got so good at it, then maybe that's the knock. Maybe this is your branch coming down on the line, because the lawn is always shorter than you think. It's almost never an ocean. It's usually about 41 feet, and the only thing on the other side is a person who'd be glad you came. If stories like this one stay with you, there are more of them here on the channel, waiting for whenever you need one.